Hey, what is up guys? This is Nishi from MST.TV here, back with another Market Watch episode. So for today's episode, we're focusing a bit more on cards related to upcoming support or more fun rogue strategies in the game right now. I think a lot of players are pretty bored with seeing nothing but Snake Eye and Snake Eye Fire King everywhere, especially when 90% of all the lists running around are exactly the same. I have a regionals coming up at the end of this month. I already have my invite. I'm actually just thinking of picking up a troll deck or something for that event rather than playing meta because it does really get repetitive. So we're looking at some more interesting cards today for decks that are either interesting possibilities right now or will be interesting to consider within the next couple of months. Alright guys, before we get started, I'd like to take a second to thank the sponsor of today's video, HelloFresh. Whether you're trying to save money, eat better, or stress less, HelloFresh is here to help you do all three. Join America's #1 meal kit today and say hello to your most delicious year yet with fresh ingredients and chef-crafted recipes at a price you will love, delivered directly to your door. Plus, now you can treat yourself and pair our delicious meals with free dessert for life. Get one free dessert item per box while your subscription is active. Between work and keeping up with both meta trends and the Yu-Gi-Oh market, sometimes Yu-Gi-Oh really does feel like a second job all on its own. HelloFresh is an amazing way to keep your schedule a little bit less hectic so that you can have great meals while still keeping up with the rest of your busy schedule. You can skip the step of having to meticulously plan out each and every one of your meals and still have access to a wide variety of options as you can explore HelloFresh's biggest menu yet. There's more than 45 different recipes that can support your lifestyle. On top of that, the ingredients are packed fresh and everything arrives pre-portioned for you already. That's right, you don't have to waste time measuring every little thing out and doing 1,000 different dishes because HelloFresh handles the meal planning and the shopping. You just open the box and take everything out. It's a lot less hassle so you can get straight to the cooking and eating and then diving back into the other parts of your day. So guys, click the link in the description below or make sure to use our referral code MST16FM and you can receive 16 free meals as well as free dessert for life as long as your subscription is active. Thank you again to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video. Alright, so the first card I want to talk about today is Marincess Spring Girl. So there are several Marincess cards that have caught the attention of players, with Marincess being somewhat of an interesting rogue deck right now. They're very combo heavy, and they can do some interesting things. I think the coolest thing that they do is use Zealantis to banish the field, and since you are waterlocked, you can summon back your own Marincess monsters, but you can't bring back the non-water monsters of your opponent. Spring Girl is a really good card in and of itself. It's basically just a free special summon by banishing a Marincess monster from your graveyard, but it can also potentially burn your opponent for damage as well. The main thing here is that actually Jesse Cotton did a video where he played this deck at his locals going 3-1, and he talks about the strengths of the deck and its combo lines, which has gotten a ton of players wanting to try it out. Spring Girl has just the one super rare printing that came from Duels from the Deep, which is probably one of the worst sets that's ever been printed. I do think that boxes on TCG Player right now are like $20 to $25. Absolutely crazy. As you guys can see from the graph here, Spring Girl was roughly a $2 card before, but as of a few weeks ago, this card has gradually climbed up in price and now sits around $8 each. The other card that is trending from the same set that only has one printing is Marincess Dive, which is a really solid normal spell for the deck. However, Spring Girl has gone up to around the same price as Dive, so it's seen a bigger increase percentage-wise because Spring Girl was used at 3 in Jesse Cotton's list, whereas Dive was only run at 2. Now, I don't really expect that much more from Marincess until they eventually get some more support, but outside of Spring Girl and Dive, the deck is actually pretty affordable and honestly looks interesting to try out at your locals if you are bored of the current format. Up next, we'll touch on a fabled monster. It's the fabled Cerberus. So we have the Fiendsmith archetype revealed now, with the card slated to come out in the Infinite Forbidden later this year. The Fiendsmith looks like a really interesting archetype. They're a deck that revolves around light fiend monsters, so players have naturally tried to blend them together with magical musketeers and the fabled archetypes. I'm looking at the fabled Cerberus here, which is a level 2 tuner that special summons itself when it's discarded. Yes, I did check, and this one is a tuner unlike Luri. Really, we could be talking about any number of fabled monsters in this slot because so many different ones might potentially be used by the deck, but because it's so new, it's not clear yet which fabled monsters are going to be optimal to run alongside Fiendsmith. However, they will naturally have a bunch of cards that synergize well since the Fiendsmith has a normal spell that lets you search for a light fiend from your deck and then discard a card, while the fabled are an archetype that have effects that revolve around discarding each other to proc their effects. The trend that we see price-wise with Cerberus also reflects the price of most of the other fabled cards that are getting some attention. Now for the most part, a lot of the fabled monsters have already been reprinted in Hidden Arsenal Chapter 1, and they're mostly common, so if you are just looking for a copy of the card to use, you should be able to grab them for pretty cheap, and that's the case with Cerberus as well. We do, however, have the original secret rare copies of Cerberus, which are up at $3 to $4 each, but the major spikes we've seen are with the original DT printings. In Cerberus' case, the card is up to around $10 per copy on TCG Player. With the Fabled cards, I'm not convinced that the way to play the deck will be a huge Fabled engine. I do think they'll be used as a smaller package, almost like a little toolbox that you can search with the normal spell. Maybe they'll play Cat Sith like how Blue Eyes did because it was a searchable way to pop different floodgates. If I were you guys, I would pick up a set of each of the common ones because they are still pretty cheap, but offload the expensive original DT printings if you happen to have them lying around. The next card we have here is an interesting one. It's Black Rose Moonlight Dragon. So I don't know if this card was like a retrain of Black Rose Dragon or what exactly, but this is also a generic level 7 synchro monster. This one's pretty cool. If it's special summoned, or if a level 5 or higher monster is special summoned to the opponent's field, you can target any of your opponent's special summoned monsters and return it to the hand. So it's really interesting because this effect happens when it's summoned, so disruption on your own turn, but it can also potentially be an interruption you set up when you're going first as well. This card is actually an extra deck option used in the OCG by the Tenpai Dragon deck. They're a strategy that generally wants to go second and OTK your opponent through the battle phase, but if they are in a situation where they're forced to go first, depending on your matchup, Moonlight Dragon here is a decent card to try to end your board on. Now fortunately, Moonlight Dragon did have a couple of reprints. It was a super in something like High Speed Riders, and then it was also in Legendary Duelist Season 2, so it has those colored ultra rare printings as well. Any of those versions is going to cost you around $3 to $4, not too crazy. I'm just not really a fan of those colored ultras. The nicest and the original printing is that YF07 Ultra, which I believe came out in an old manga. Those things have shot up ever since Tenpai Dragon started to become popular in the OCG a couple of months ago, and right now that printing is going to cost you about $25 each. So yeah, honestly, nothing that crazy aside from the original printing. You can actually tell a difference between the two ultras if you're really looking for it, but I do think it's a nice card to have access to either way. It's something you'll want to own a copy of if you are interested in playing Tenpai Dragons. Just be wary because this is the sort of card that I could see getting some sort of rarity bump down the road, so if I were you guys, I'd look to pick up one of the cheaper ultras or the super just to have access in case I want to play the deck. So this is a bit of an unexpected one. It's Tachon Transmigration. So just last week we had the announcement of a duelist pack in the OCG called Duelists of Brilliance, and that is the set where the new Trickstar support revealed last Thursday is supposed to be coming. Well, one of the other archetypes getting support is the Tachyon cards, so support for all of the different Galaxy Eye stuff, and Tachon Transmigration is a counter trap that supports the theme. This card is honestly really insane. This card negates all spells, traps, and monster effects activated in the same chain as this card before this card in the chain, and it can shuffle the negated cards back into the deck. That alone is already insane since it means you can't chain block the card, but on top of that, if you control Galaxy Eye's Tachyon Dragon, you can activate this card from your hand, which is just absolutely ridiculous. Obviously, we don't know exactly what the Tachyon Dragon support is going to be, but Tachyon Transmigration is a strong enough card that it's safe to say regardless of what the new cards are, the deck should be running at least a copy or two of this card. With this card, it's a very recent price spike that we've seen, and just with the original secret rare printing from World Superstars as the only holo version. It is a very nice looking card. Right now, the cheapest ones on TCG Player are going to cost you about $12. The graph here obviously isn't updated with that market price, though we have only seen a few copies actually move around that price as of a few days ago. Fortunately, this card does have a common and rare printing as well. Both of those are really cheap, coming in at only 50 cents or so. Of course, even if the card is really useful next format, I would think Tachyon Transmigration would probably be reprinted in that Duelist pack if and when it gets imported to the TCG. For now, we can't really do too much. We're just going to have to wait and see what the new support looks like. On to the next one, we have number 15, Gimmick Puppet Giant Grinder. This card is a generic rank 8 monster that's an OTK piece used for one of the Gimmick Puppet OTK lines after they get their new support from the Infinite Forbidden. Now, twice per turn during the main phase, you can detach a material from this card to destroy an opponent's monster. Then if that monster is an Xyz, you inflict damage to your opponent equal to that monster's attack points. So I believe there's a way to summon a couple of the Gimmick Puppet Xyz monsters over to your opponent's side of the field after you've linked them off, and you're supposed to use Giant Grinder to burn them with it. Obviously, Gimmick Puppets are something that a lot of players are talking about right now. They can do some really crazy things with their new cards. I think we have to assume that they'll be handled on the ban list in some way preemptively, since I don't think we want a tier 0 or tier 1 FTK deck. That wouldn't be very fun to play against, but for now the deck does look pretty insane. Number 15 has 3 different printings in the TCG, but for the most part just 2 of them are accessible to North American players. We have the Secret Rare as the only holo printing here. Those are about $15 right now on TCG Player, and as you can see here from the graph, they've had a massive spike within the last couple of weeks. There is also the maximum gold rare printing, which hasn't really moved, it's still under $1. Now the other printing worth noting is the super rare from the advent calendar that only came out in Germany. With that version, you don't really see them in people's trade binders or on TCG Player very much here in North America. There's not very many of the supers on TCG Player right now, and when they do come up, they're usually overpriced at around $10 or so. However, on Card Market over in Europe, you can still grab them for like under $1 because they are quite common. Don't go and overpay for them if you happen to see them here. So this card is an interesting combo piece if you're interested in playing Gimmick Puppets or trying out the FTK eventually. However, I really do believe that they will ban some piece of this deck beforehand. So with this card, grab the rares if you're interested in trying it out way down the road in the future. Don't splurge on the secrets or anything like that, since there is a very solid chance that you won't even be able to use them. So this card is an interesting one to note. It's Medion Drron. This card is the ritual spell for the Drytron deck, and in all honesty, it's nothing really that crazy. With Drytrons, your tributing is all based on tributing attack points greater than the attack points of the monster that you're trying to summon, rather than working with levels. But the cool thing is that with Medion Drron, you can have one of your Drytron monsters lose 1000 attack points, and you get to add this card from the graveyard back to your hand, and for that reason, this card was typically only played at 1. Now with this card, of course it spiked in price after the Drytron support was announced. This card still has only ever been printed back in Genesis Impact, so the Ultras, as you guys can see from the graph below, spiked instantly. They were down at around $5 or $6 each. They're now almost $20 per copy. There's been a similar sharp spike with the CR printing as well, which was down at around $30 but is now up to $60 each. This card and Drytron Nova remain the 2 main Drytron cards that have not yet been reprinted. It is sort of strange because Genesis Impact came out a few years ago, and because of how long it's been since Drytron were relevant, I think people have just kind of forgotten about the card completely. Now, even with the new cards, I think you generally want to play a single copy of the ritual spell, since you should be able to search for it, and you can just add it from your graveyard back to your hand. However, despite it still just being a one-of, the card's price is now for the Ultra higher than it was back when Drytron was a tier 1 strategy. I really do hope that Konami reprints Drytron Nova and Medion Drron in something like Terminal Revenge, or else these cards are just going to spike up once again when the Drytron support officially becomes released here in the TCG. And finally, there's one last card I want to touch on here. It's not actually related to any specific archetype, it's Iron Thunder. This is sort of a strange new counter trap card. I know a lot of players were thinking it would be sort of a replacement for some of the Solemn cards in certain decks. So when a spell card, trap card, or monster effect is activated on the field, you can pay half your life points, negate that card, then destroy the card and destroy all other cards in the same column as the destroyed card, not as this card. So on the surface, this card is a lot like the Solemn cards, but it has that added effect to destroy additional cards. I think players are more sold on the potential behind this card, and so within the last day or so, we've actually seen this card spike in price for the quarter century printing. The QCR was down at around $30 to $35, but all of a sudden the cheapest ones you can get on TCG Player are around $65 to $70. However, we haven't seen very much price movement on the Secret Rare, which remains around the $7 mark. Now, I'm not completely sold on this card. Although it does have a lot of potential, I do sort of think that this card is going to flop. On one hand, it can only negate the effects of monsters on the field. I feel like a big part of something like Solemn Strike is that you can negate hand traps as well, where in a deck like Labyrinth, you can negate an Ash or Ghost spell that's trying to block your Big Welcome, and this card guarantees that your card resolves, but Iron Thunder doesn't give the deck the ability to have that sort of protection. The other thing is that this card will sort of have like a reverse infinite impermanence effect, where if your opponent really wants to ensure that their card effect can go through, they will place the card in the same column as one of your cards. So if you do negate it, you have to destroy your own thing as well. And since this is a counter trap, you probably won't even have a window to respond with your card first. I don't know, I think that maybe there's going to be a time where this card could be used, but I'm not sold on it being anywhere close to replacing the Solemns or even being any sort of meta staple. If you can, I would grab a set of this card to own, maybe for like $5 each, just in case it does happen to see play, but this is not the card I would be investing in too many copies of because I'm really just not sold on it. Alright guys, that is all we have for today's episode. I definitely think we need to see a change in the game, and hopefully the ban list is going to bring about some significant changes. I'm kind of sick of seeing Snake Eye and Snake Eye Fire King everywhere, so I think it's important that we have some of these other things to talk about, but we're definitely going to see some changes after the list, because over the next few months we have not just Legacy of Destruction coming out, but we also have Rarity Collection 2 and Battles of Legend Terminal Revenge as well, so hopefully that's going to bring some huge things for us. Anyways guys, if you did enjoy today's Market Watch episode, please make sure you let me know by hitting that thumbs up button. Make sure you leave a comment in the comment section down below. Hit subscribe if you haven't already, and until next time guys, don't forget to hold on to your MST.TV.